Next up, we've got a good friend of mine, Ross Cooney, from a company called iamproperty, who's going to tell us about what it's like to be the CTO of a startup company and how that cybersecurity sort of fits into that.
Perfect. Thanks very much. Okay, so my little talk is a little bit different to talks we've had earlier today. What I'll do is I'll jump straight in and give you a little bit of context in a few minutes. But first, an introduction to myself. My name's Ross Cooney. I'm from Ireland, as you can probably guess from my accent, but living over here in the UK for nearly 20 years. I'm 20 years in IT, actually approaching 25 years, and I started as a junior developer, predominantly a system administrator. Moved up to be a senior developer. I was a consultant for a little over 10 years. But in the last couple of years, I've moved into an executive position. I'm now chief technical officer of a startup company. What I've found over the last couple of years, as I've stepped into that, is the CTO quite often is removed from the grindstone, the nitty-gritty of tech, and that for me personally is something that's hard. I'm a highly technical person, and being away from the grindstone, being away from actually looking at logs and looking at graphs is something that I'm not familiar with. But let me talk a little bit about this, what we're going to talk about today. This talk is not exclusively for cyber professionals. In fact, I think what I'm going to talk about today will be useful for general IT practitioners, for business people, and cyber professionals. What I want to do is tell you my story about what it's been like to join a startup company that's trying its best to scale. And throughout the talk, I'll talk about some issues. Really what I'm doing is I'm summarizing 3 years of experience in my current role. So during the talk, I might skirt over some issues. That's just because we've got 25 minutes here. However, I will at the end try my best to answer any questions that are in the chat. So if you have any questions, please just stick them in the chat. I will try my best to answer them verbally on the call. Right, so let me tell you a bit about the company I joined. So it's a property services company called iamproperty. When I joined a little over 3 years ago, they had a little over 100 staff, annual turnover of about £9 million. But it was a startup company trying to scale. So what I mean by that was, it was a company that grew rapidly. It had bucket loads of shadow IT. So if you're familiar with what shadow IT is, it's basically IT systems that were set up by well-meaning individuals in the company, but effectively there's no structure, there's no documentation, probably not backed up. There was no boilerplate policies. So when I looked into Active Directory and looked at all the users, every single one of them was set up differently. There's a lot of diverse IT is what I'd say. Predominantly there was a lack of good quality technical equipment, everything from laptops all the way up to firewalls and servers. There was a lack of good quality and robust systems, and systems of accountability, as well as systems and processes for running stuff. And there was lack of investment in people. And all of these are normal, and it's perfectly normal for a startup to have all these issues. And it's, when I talk about, my 10-day impressions, what impression did I have after 10 days after joining the company? What I felt was, this is a really good company, clearly is. It's a profitable company, it's a growing company. It's in an industry that has plenty of opportunity to expand. But it's staffed by a load of technical enthusiasts who were trying their best to get the job done. There's no doubt about it, but there was no structure around what they were doing, and no standards. And while it looked scary, I felt it was solvable. And let's think about why the company might want to solve some of these issues, because it is quite evident, but let's just talk about it. My goal was to add structure and rigor to the network without breaking it. Structure and rigor that would allow it to grow and scale and be predictable, and structure and rigor that would allow it to be monitored. And with those, what we have is a stable, reliable, growing IT network. Now, this is an IT or a cybersecurity discussion, a lot of what I was doing and a lot of the stuff that I'm going to describe in a few moments talk about operational changes I've made in the company. In reality, what I was doing was stepping through what I looked at, what I look as risk areas or vulnerabilities that may or may not be in the company. So let me step through some of these, and I think they will be quite evident. Some of these are quite basic. In other words, my goal was to lower complexity, standardize, visualize, monitor, and report. So before I go into the examples, let's ask a question that any executive would ask me. Why is a CTO getting involved in the minutiae of IT? And I think if I had a CTO mentor at the time, that CTO mentor would take me aside and say, whoa, you're getting back into the nitty gritty. What you need to do is go back into the executive boardroom and set strategy, not set practice. The reality is you'll find as the CTO of a startup, there is nobody to do the work because there's nobody employed quite often in the early stages of a company. There's no one there to monitor these systems, to standardize the systems, to give the credibility to be able to set standards. So what I needed to do is recruit a team, and over the last 3.5 years, I've recruited a team. At the moment, it's at 15. By this calendar year, it should be at 20. And this team help monitor, manage, standardize, produce, and run this IT system for us. And it's quite a robust job, but we now have robust processes and tasks and teams. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about now, when I say I did something, quite often it's my team did it, perhaps under my instruction, perhaps without my instruction. But these are things that have gone through over the last 3 years. Okay, so here's one of the first things I did. When you join a company, licensing is the first thing that you should be concerned about as an executive. Licensing is using illegal software is legal, but also it's also unstable. It also adds attack vectors. So licensing was the very, very first thing I looked at. Microsoft licensing, we had many different versions of Microsoft Office. Everyone had a different version, depending on whatever PC or laptop you had. It came with a different license, and if you didn't like the license, you upgraded it. So we had many, many versions of Microsoft Office. That meant that, well, it was pretty hard to work out actually if we were license compliant. I had a confidence that we were, but I couldn't prove it. At the same time, providing IT support to a company with many versions of Office was really hard. So what we found was that Microsoft Office was a problem. Microsoft Windows was another. We had many, many different versions of Microsoft Windows. So the first step I did was I standardized all versions. Everyone had the exact same version of Windows. Everyone had the exact same version of Microsoft Office. We migrated everything to Office 365. We got rid of all of our internal email systems, moved that to Office 365, got rid of all of our Office licensing and just put that onto Office 365, pay for it by month. I now have a clear, concise report that shows and proves that I'm compliant. Also from an IT perspective, it's much, much easier to provide support. What I've just described sounds like a really easy thing to do, and on paper, it is easy to say transition 100 disparate users, all of whom are a law to themselves at this stage, to a centralized system. It's quite an operational task along with a technical task. But as I said earlier, I felt we were compliant when I joined the business. I just couldn't prove it, but I can now. And that was the first step. A hell of a lot of standardization happened in that process, as you can guess as well. So we got rid of loads and loads and loads of PCs that were either out of, just simply weren't able to run Windows 10 or just simply weren't fit for purpose. Another example of a project we worked on, we have an internal application that pretty much runs our business. It's a custom application. We have a team in-house that have written it. It manages every part of our business. And at the time when I joined, it was running on 11 dedicated servers in a data center in London. And it was working. We were doing 9 million turnover, but the reality was it's 11 servers, and it was incredibly complex. And one of the problems with the proliferation of servers is quite often you have non-standard operating systems, and it's hard to put manners on a system that's grown organically. So what I did over 18 months was shrink that down to 2 servers. We effectively built 2 servers. We moved all of the tech to that, shut down the other 11. Once we did that, in doing so, removed an incredible amount of complexity out of our network and migrated the whole system then to AWS. In order to manage vulnerability, clearly there's a cyber security discussion. For the first time, we implemented quarterly automated vulnerability scans of our various applications. We used an application called AppCheck. It's expensive, but it's a very, very good automated tool. It means it does all the heavy lifting for you. Now, as you can guess, on an application that perhaps hadn't been doing these scans for a while, first report that we did lit up like a Christmas tree. Now, the goal here, let me just end this call here. The goal here was to identify the important issues, fix them, retest, make sure that those important issues were fixed, and then get on with the job. So we ended up doing scans every month. Every month we ran a new scan. We made sure that the issues we resolved last month were fixed and still fixed. We then identified maybe 2 or 3 things that we thought were achievable in the next sprint. We then fixed them. We then retested, proved that we'd fixed them, and moved on. Effectively, we meant for about 12 months, we were permanently doing vulnerability scans. Once we got to a stage where this automated scan, do you know what I'm going to do, if you don't mind? I'm just going to turn off Microsoft Teams. I'm getting all sorts of updates while I'm talking. That's interrupting me. Once we got the automated scans up to a stage where we felt comfortable, the next step we did was instruct a CREST accredited penetration testing company, and they run now quarterly scans, and the reports for the first time I'm actually quite proud of. But it came out of a process of iteration. It came out of a process of standardization initially, 11 servers down to 2 servers onto AWS. Secondly, it came with updating the security. So my point here is standardization, removing complexity, and then doing automated testing, tidying up as much as you can, and then getting a third party to test. It's very, very, very important. But what we're taking here is an application that took many, many years to develop, and through a process of iteration, making it not only more secure. As I said earlier, I'm confident that it was secure, but the reality is I couldn't prove it. And a penetration test from a CREST accredited penetration testing company is exactly what you need. There were a number of other aspects that I looked at. For example, networking. We had 5 different wireless networks. Clearly, we don't need 5 networks. Switches, we had 18 different switches from different vendors. Clearly, all of those went in the bin and they got replaced with Meraki stack. So all of our switches, firewalls, and wireless base stations were upgraded to Cisco Meraki. Firewall rules, we had 28 firewall rules. That got cut down to 8. In terms of shadow IT, we had people using various different file share companies. So we had Dropbox, we had Google Drive, we had Box, and we had all sorts of other ones I'd never heard of previously before. Every single one of them got deleted. It literally, once we found out about them, we shut them down, moved all the files to a local network drive. Subsequently, by the way, because of COVID, we've moved to OneDrive, but effectively, everyone using a file share had it shut down, and eventually put a process in place to ban the use of third-party file sharing. Second thing we did was equipment. Now, as a company that's grown very quickly, we had people who had laptops that were old, secondhand perhaps. We had senior members of the company who didn't like the equipment they were given, so they just went out to Curry's PC World and purchased a brand new laptop for themselves and expensed it. In doing so, it wasn't set up on the network, didn't have proper GPO rules, didn't have proper authentication, probably didn't even have antivirus. So we had this disparate set of equipment. Now, clearly, it's impossible to provide support on a network that you don't have visibility of. So what we did was implement a stage of replacement. So we replaced pretty much every single computer laptop. It was an expensive process, but in doing so, we also installed a remote management tool called Ninja RMM. So what we now have is a dashboard that manages or has visualization of our whole IT estate. Every IT element is managed through this. So we can force authentication, we can force encryption, we can force antivirus, we can force backup. It's all a centralized system. It's very, very inexpensive. It's called Ninja RMM. Okay, so the next two things I think are quite important. First one is phishing. We were compromised on a number of occasions through phishing. It was just a bobby basic phishing attack. You receive an email, it looks legitimate. You click on the email, you put your password in, somebody has now got access to your network credentials. We did training, didn't work. Pretty much immediately after doing the training, we had another attack. So then we looked at our email filtering suite, and we thought we'd upgrade that. So we were already using a third party. We moved to another third party. This is an industry standard third party email filtering service. We then upgraded our antivirus locally, up the rules to manage that. Same again with more attacks. We have now fixed our phishing problem 100%, and we did it using a tool, well, two processes. One, a tool called Darktrace, another one called 2FA or dual-factor authentication. Darktrace is a cybersecurity tool. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's in the leading edge of intrusion detection. So, for example, it would look at your web traffic and see what types of websites people are going to. We look at your email traffic, look at the sorts of emails people are receiving. And so there's several months of learning. Once you then turn it on, what it does is it looks at your traffic again. And if you start doing stuff that you hadn't been doing previously, or that doesn't look standard, it actually starts blocking traffic. So it blocks web traffic, blocks network access, and blocks emails. And it's incredibly accurate. It's obscenely accurate. In fact, in the 2 years that Darktrace has been running in an autonomous mode in our network, there hasn't been one single false positive. It's absolutely accurate. So what it will do is this: an email will arrive in. It will arrive in from an unknown person. Now, unlike most email filtering, this system has an incredible knowledge of who we do business with. It also has an incredible knowledge on the way in which we do business, and it monitors or it tracks that email using thousands of different rules, all using AI. It then works out a threat matrix, and if the email looks dodgy, it just blocks it. There hasn't been a single, and since we've been using this email system, a single false positive. And listen to that. I challenge anyone who uses third-party filtering to say that there's no false positives. Not a single false positive. And we're checking thousands of emails every hour now, and it just simply filters it with 100% accuracy. However, if an email does get through, what Darktrace can do, and Darktrace subsequently decides that an email needs to be removed, it can remove it from people's inbox, sometimes before they've even read it. It will then send a report to me saying that this email has got through, it went to these people, and out of those people, these 2 people actually clicked on the link. So it allows immediately to make calculated decisions and identify exactly who is at risk. That gives you the opportunity to go and lock the account and do training and tighten up your system. But it is an incredibly accurate system. I cannot recommend them as a solution higher than this. The second thing is dual-factor authentication. Everyone in the business told me that there was no way that dual-factor authentication will work in a company like ours. And let's face it, a lot of our staff are not technically, the salespeople. They're not technical people. Dual-factor authentication works. It's easy to use, and anybody of any age can use it. There should be no impediment to using dual-factor authentication. But between Darktrace and 2FA, we've absolutely locked our phishing issue. Don't get me wrong, I'm still vigilant, but it has absolutely locked our problem out, which is pretty important. I'm open to taking questions, by the way, on that as well. So if you have any questions about this or anything else I've talked about, please stick them in the chat, and we'll have a look at them after the call. The last thing I wanted to talk about was PCI DSS. Right. I don't know if you're familiar with the payment card processing industry or accepting credit card payments. PCI DSS will be something that you'll spend a lot of time learning about. When I joined the business, we had about 9 million turnover, 100% of it on debit or credit cards. So we were, quite. PCI DSS was really important to us. When I joined, I looked to see whether or not we were compliant with the standard, and I don't think we were. And that was a big problem, because complying with the standard has costs that are both operational and financial. Now, there are processes that need to change, and there are systems you need to buy and put in place. It is a root and branch change. So rather than trying to comply with the PCI DSS, what I did was something different. I tried to make sure that the PCI DSS standards did not apply to us. In other words, I made sure that we did not need to comply with PCI DSS. And I'll explain in some high level how we did that. First thing we did was we identified what's called cardholder data environment. So if you're familiar with PCI DSS, a cardholder data environment is any part of any system, written or online, or written or in a database, that includes cardholder data. It's called a cardholder data environment. What we did was identify it, and we killed it. We absolutely removed all PCI DSS or cardholder data environment stuff. We ended all call recordings of card data, and we pushed transactions online. So we ended the requirement for PCI DSS. The second thing is we realized that we were, trading a lot in credit cards, so it was a high risk. So we try our best to comply with PCI DSS, but it's not a requirement, and we have a sign off now from both our insurers and our various banking providers that we don't need PCI DSS. Right, so I'll wrap up quickly and recognize I've been speaking very quickly here. I'm describing what it's taken 3.5 years to do. As I said earlier, not all predominantly done by me, but what does it mean, and does this mean that we're more secure? The answer is I hope so. From a cybersecurity perspective, hope gets you nowhere. So I believe that our systems help us. I certainly sleep better at night. What effect has this on the company? When I joined the company at 9 million turnover, this year projected for 30 million. When I joined the company, we had 100 staff. This year, well, as of now, we have 220 staff. Are all of these directly relatable to the IT and security things we've been talking about today? No, but clearly it has had an impact. So I like to think that my knowledge of IT and cybersecurity has helped us to streamline our business, make it streamline our tech stack, and make us more reliable and secure.
That was really good, Ross. It's what was interesting was the application of some of these things that you taught, and then you need to go and apply them in the real world against real threats, rather than fictitious ones. No questions on the Q&A, but some comments about the fascinating approaches that you've taken together. So thank you very much.